3.9T42, Buffalo, New York, 14:30 hours. Factory workers' wrench froze mid-turn. Fifth test pilot that week walked away from gleaming P-39 Airacobra. Fresh paint still drying on revolutionary mid-engine fuselage. Tricycle landing gear catching afternoon light through hangar doors. Nose-mounted 37mm cannon, promising devastation nobody believed in. Pilot's words echoed across assembly floor. "I'm not flying that death trap." Numbers told desperate story. America needed fighters. Factories running 3 shifts, 7 days weekly. Production lines churning metal into hope against Germany and Japan. Yet brand new fighters sat unwanted. British tested, cancelled orders. French never received theirs before Paris fell. American pilots requested transfers to anything else. Even manufacturers' test pilots developing second thoughts. This rejection would cascade through history in ways nobody imagined. Aircraft dismissed as America's worst fighter would teach lessons shaping jet-age aviation. Flying Coffin would enable Soviet pilots to rival war's greatest aces. Failure that should have died in Buffalo would help turn tide of largest land war humanity ever witnessed. Watch what happens when castoffs become legends. 3.1942 marked critical juncture for Allied aviation procurement. Japanese-controlled Pacific skies. German Messerschmitt Bf-109s dominated European theater. Luftwaffe operated comfortably at 25,000 feet. Zero fighters climbed higher still. Allied response struggled against technical and production realities that killed pilots faster than enemy bullets. Bell Aircraft Corporation engineers had delivered revolutionary design. Moving Allison F-1710 engine behind pilot created perfect weight distribution. Open nose space for devastating 37mm cannon, capable of punching through armor plate. Long drive shaft ran beneath cockpit floor, connecting engine to propeller through complex gears and bearings. Theory suggested brilliance. Reality delivered catastrophe. Drive shaft vibrations rattled entire airframe. Pilots described sensation as sitting atop washing machine at full speed. Precision flying became nearly impossible. Engine placement meant mechanical failures sent metal fragments and flames directly toward cockpit. Conventional fighters showed engine problems ahead where pilots saw warnings. P-39 delivered fire to pilots' back without notice. Colonel Bruce Holloway evaluated P-39 for combat deployment, early 1942. His assessment circulated through Army Air Force's headquarters, words cutting through procurement optimism with surgical precision. Aircraft fundamentally unsuited for high-altitude interception role for which it was designed. Ceiling inadequate. Rate of climb poor above 10,000 feet. Handling characteristics at altitude dangerous. Cannot in good conscience recommend this aircraft for combat operations against Luftwaffe. Strategic mathematics compounded problems. Allied intelligence indicated German bomber formations cruising 20,000 to 28,000 feet. Fighter escorts operated 5,000 feet higher. Intercepting these formations required fighters climbing rapidly to engagement altitude, maintaining performance throughout combat envelope. P-39's Allison engine, powerful at sea level, choked and wheezed above 12,000 feet. This wasn't inconvenience. This was death sentence. German pilots would die from altitude advantage, speed, position, initiative, all favoring attacker. P-39 pilots struggling for altitude presented perfect target. Enemy fighters struck from above with accumulated velocity. Physics favored altitude. Tactics demanded it. P-39 couldn't deliver it. Production realities prevented rational response. Canceling program meant shutting entire manufacturing operation, starting over from scratch. Time lost measured in months, perhaps years. Pearl Harbor still burned in national memory. Factories being built, workers being trained, production lines being established. United States reeling from Pacific defeats needed aircraft immediately. So factories kept running. Workers in Buffalo continued riveting airframes nobody wanted, installing engines, mounting weapon systems. Spring 1942 brought hundreds of P-39s rolling off production lines with nowhere to go. Storage fields across country filled with unwanted fighters gathering dust while war raged without them. Then Soviet Union, fighting desperately against German invasion, needed aircraft, any aircraft. Joseph Stalin made clear through diplomatic channels, fighters, bombers, tanks needed in massive quantities immediately. United States, eager supporting ally and keeping Eastern Front active, began shipping military equipment through Lend-Lease program. Among shipments, hundreds of P-39 Airacobras nobody else wanted. American officials privately viewed this as disposing embarrassing mistake while technically fulfilling obligations. Thinking went, send fighters we cannot use, keep good stuff for ourselves, hope Russians find some use for them. If P-39s proved inadequate on Eastern Front as in American hands, well, at least losses wouldn't be American pilots. Aircraft began journey through roundabout route, loaded onto cargo ships in American ports, sailed through U-boat-infested waters to Persian Gulf ports, disassembled and transported overland through Iran into southern Russia. Journey took months. Many aircraft damaged in transit, some lost to German submarines. Late 1942. First P-39s arriving at Soviet air bases received reception very different from American experience. What happened next would rewrite fighter aviation history and haunt American procurement officers for decades. Soviet senior Lieutenant Grigory Rechkalov approached Airacobra without preconceptions Americans carried. He didn't care about high-altitude performance, wasn't fighting at high altitude. Air war over Eastern Front brutal, chaotic, conducted primarily below 10,000 feet. German Stukas dive-bombed Soviet positions at low level. Soviet Sturmovaks attacked German tanks at treetop height. Desperate, swirling dogfights characterized Eastern Front combat in thick air where P-39's Allison engine performed beautifully. Rechkalov's hands gripped controls 10/4/1942. First combat sortie in American machine. Oil temperature gauge steady. Engine vibrations familiar now after training flights. 37 now unloaded with armor-piercing rounds. German Junkers, Ju-88. Bomber appeared 3,000 feet ahead. Engines struggling with bomb load. Crew unaware of danger approaching from 6 o'clock low. 3 seconds to firing solution. Rechkalov's training on wooden Lag-3 fighters made P-39 feel like precision instrument. Gun sights centered on bomber's tail section. Thumb-pressed cannon trigger. Single 37mm shell struck Ju-88's empennage. Entire tail section separated from fuselage. German bomber tumbled from sky. No second shot needed. No ammunition wasted. American cannon delivered exactly what Soviet tactics required. Rechkalov filed combat report that evening. Words revealing cultural differences in aircraft evaluation. American machine heavy but solid. Does not climb well but dives like stone. Cannon magnificent. Today destroyed Junkers Ju-88 with 3 shells. Entire tail section separated from fuselage. This aircraft rewards aggression and punishes hesitation. That philosophy, aggression rewarded, hesitation punished, became foundation of Soviet Airacobra tactics. Pilots who had flown underpowered, poorly armed fighters found P-39 revelation. Sturdy construction absorbed battle damage, tearing apart fragile Soviet designs. Low-altitude environment meant P-39 actually faster and more maneuverable than many German fighters. Technical advantages multiplied in Soviet hands. Cannon firepower devastated German armor and aircraft. Single well-placed shot destroyed bombers requiring dozens of machine gun rounds from other fighters. Sturdy airframe survived combat damage. Car door cockpit entry allowed rapid egress if aircraft damaged. Tricycle landing gear simplified operations from rough Soviet airfields. Soviet pilots developed tactics exploiting these advantages while minimizing altitude limitations. Stayed low where engine performed optimally. Used superior low-altitude speed for hit-and-run attacks. Employed devastating cannon firepower for single-pass kills. Avoided prolonged dogfights favoring more maneuverable German fighters. Results spoke through blood and wreckage. Alexander Pokryshkin received his first P-39 early 1943. already experienced fighter pilot with multiple kills in Soviet aircraft, approached American fighter skeptically. Initial flights revealed aircraft strengths aligned perfectly with his aggressive tactics. Pokryshkin's tactical innovations transformed Soviet fighter doctrine, developed finger four formation providing mutual support while maintaining offensive flexibility, emphasized altitude advantage even within P-39's limitations by starting fights from highest possible position, perfected vertical fighting techniques using P-39's excellent dive performance. His combat record validated approach, Spring 1943 offensive over Kuban bridgehead saw Pokryshkin's unit destroying German aircraft at unprecedented rates. His personal tally climbed steadily. 5 kills, 10 kills, 20 kills, 20 kills. Each victory refined his understanding of P-39's capabilities. German pilots began reporting encounters with new Soviet fighter tactics. Luftwaffe intelligence analyzed wreckage, captured aircraft, interrogated prisoners. Reports confused German commanders. Soviet pilots achieving results seemingly impossible, given aircraft limitations, Americans reported. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, commanding Luftwaffe fighter wing opposing Soviet forces 1943, later wrote, "We didn't understand how Soviets were achieving such success with aircraft Americans rejected. Our intelligence said P-39 couldn't climb, couldn't fight at altitude, suffered mechanical problems. Yet Soviet pilots using these machines were destroying our experienced pilots. We assumed Americans had given Soviets improved version. Post-war examination proved aircraft identical. Difference wasn't machine, difference was how it was employed." Numbers accumulated through 1943 and 1944 told story American officials hadn't anticipated. Soviet P-39 pilots collectively destroyed thousands of German aircraft. Individual aces emerged with scores rivaling war's greatest pilots. Aircraft dismissed as flying coffin became instrument of devastation. Pokryshkin's score reached 30 confirmed victories by summer 1943, 40 by winter. Soviet command awarded him Hero of Soviet Union twice, nation's highest honor. He received third award 1944, unprecedented recognition. His tactics became standard Soviet fighter doctrine, taught to new pilots arriving at front. Rechkalov, flying same aircraft type, accumulated 56 confirmed victories. Nikolai Gulaev scored 57. Grigory Rechkalov finished war with 56 kills, second highest scoring Soviet P-39 pilot. American and British pilots, had they known these numbers, wouldn't have believed them. Same aircraft they'd rejected as unsuitable for combat. Same flying coffin test pilots refused to fly. In Soviet hands, instruments of victory. But victory carried cost measured in ways statistics never captured. Pokryshkin's wingman, Lieutenant Pavel Golovachev, died 1943 during combat over Crimea. German Bf-109 caught his P-39 during low-altitude dogfight. Single-burst severed control cables. Aircraft dove into ground at 400 kilometers per hour. Impact crater 3 meters deep. Body unrecoverable. Pokryshkin watched his friend die from 800 meters distance. Could do nothing. German fighter escaped into clouds before revenge possible. That evening, Pokryshkin sat in dispersal tent, hands still shaking. Wrote letter to Golovachev's mother. Didn't mention how death occurred. Wrote only that Pavel died as hero quickly, serving motherland. Physical wounds marked survivors. Rechkalov took cannon shell through cockpit 7.943. Fragments embedded in left leg and lower back. Field surgeon removed what he could without anesthesia. Some fragments remained, too close to vital structures for a safe extraction. Rechkalov flying again within 3 weeks, legs still weeping blood through bandages. Soviet maintenance crews worked miracles keeping aircraft operational. Replacement parts scarce, improvisations necessary. Mechanics cannibalized damaged aircraft for components. Fabricated parts from salvaged metal. Worked through -40-degree temperatures to keep fighters flying. Senior technician Dmitry Volkov maintained P-39s for Pokryshkin's regiment throughout 1943, to 1944. His post-war account described realities American engineers never imagined. We had aircraft designed for American factories with perfect tools and abundant spare parts. We had Russian winter, mud, shortages, desperation. We made it work because alternative was defeat. Saw mechanics lose fingers to frostbite while changing engines in snowstorms. Saw crews work 72 hours straight keeping aircraft operational during major offensives. American machine was good. Soviet mechanics made it great. Mathematics of lives saved through P-39 operations, staggers calculation. Each German bomber destroyed meant Soviet soldiers not killed by bombs. Each German fighter shot down meant Soviet ground attack aircraft surviving to support infantry. Each successful mission meant mothers receiving sons home alive. Conservative estimates suggest Soviet P-39 pilots destroyed 2,500 German aircraft during war. Each bomber carried crew of 4 to 6. Each destroyed German fighter meant experienced Luftwaffe pilot lost, impossible to replace by 1944. Cascading effects multiplied initial impact exponentially. Recognition came slowly, incompletely. Soviet propaganda celebrated victories but rarely mentioned American aircraft enabling them. Stalin wanted Soviet aviation appearing dominant through Soviet designs. P-39's contributions minimized in official accounts. Pilots knew truth. Archives remained classified. Pokryshkin received Hero of Soviet Union 3 times, Marshal of Aviation rank post-war, numerous decorations. Official biographies mentioned P-39 briefly, if at all. Emphasis placed on pilot skill, Soviet training, socialist superiority. Aircraft that enabled victories became footnote. American military, learning of Soviet P-39 success through intelligence reports, initially disbelieved accounts. Seemed impossible. Same aircraft American pilots rejected. Same flying coffin. German intelligence confirmed Soviet claims through captured documents, interrogations, combat loss analysis. American aviation community forced to confront uncomfortable reality. Tactical employment mattered more than absolute performance. This revelation rippled through post-war American aviation development, in ways subtle but profound. Lessons learned from P-39's contradictory performance influenced next generation of American fighters. Tricycle landing gear became standard on virtually all subsequent American aircraft. Emphasis on pilot visibility, pioneered with P-39's car door cockpit entry, became priority in fighter design. Concept of mounting heavy, slow-firing weapons in nose, validated by P-39's success with 37mm cannon, influenced armament choices for years. When Lockheed's Clarence Kelly Johnson began designing America's first operational jet fighter, P-80 Shooting Star 1943, aircraft that emerged bore striking similarities to P-39's layout. Both featured tricycle landing gear for improved handling. Both emphasized pilot visibility and maintenance ease. Both placed engine behind pilot, though in P-80 this necessitated by jet engine design rather than nose cannon desire. P-80 represented everything P-39 tried to be, but couldn't quite achieve. Taking good ideas while eliminating flaws. Connection between despised P-39 and America's jet age success wasn't coincidence. Was evolution driven by hard lessons learned from both failures and successes. P-39's failure at high altitude forced American engineers understanding critical importance of engine supercharging and performance across entire operational envelope. Its success in Soviet hands taught there was no single definition of effective fighter aircraft. Mission requirements, operational environment, tactical doctrine all influenced what made design successful. North American F-86 Sabre, America's premier jet fighter of Korean War era, took to skies 1947, carrying DNA from despised P-39, tricycle landing gear, making ground handling safe and predictable. Emphasis on pilot visibility and cockpit ergonomics. Understanding that fighter design required careful balance between competing requirements. These weren't abstract principles, were hard-won lessons purchased with embarrassment of rejection and unexpected glory of Soviet victories. German Luftwaffe conducted extensive post-war analysis of Eastern Front air combat. Documents captured by Allied forces revealed German confusion about P-39 effectiveness. Intelligence reports from 1943 to 1944 repeatedly questioned how Soviet pilots achieved results with aircraft German analysts believed inferior. Major Erich Hartmann, highest-scoring fighter ace in history with 352 confirmed victories, mostly achieved on Eastern Front, later stated, "We respected Soviet P-39 pilots. They used aircraft's strengths intelligently, stayed low where it performed well, attacked aggressively with powerful cannon, avoided situations where aircraft's weaknesses became liabilities, was masterclass in tactical adaptation." Modern fighter pilot training emphasizes lessons learned from P-39 saga. United States Air Force Fighter Weapons School teaches case study examining how tactical employment overcame technical limitations. Principle emphasized: understand your aircraft's strengths, exploit them ruthlessly, avoid situations exposing weaknesses. This doctrine, refined over decades, traces directly back to Soviet P-39 operations, proving aircraft's potential when properly employed. Connection acknowledged in training materials, though broader public remains largely unaware of Flying Coffins' contribution to American air combat development. Physical memorials to P-39 and pilots who flew it exist, scattered across former Soviet Union. Pokryshkin's statue stands in Novosibirsk, his birthplace, doesn't mention P-39 specifically. Honors pilots' achievements without acknowledging American aircraft enabling them. Historical revisionism continues even in memory. Few surviving P-39s exist in museums worldwide. National Museum of United States Air Force displays restored example alongside placard describing aircraft as unsuccessful design finding unexpected success in Soviet service. Accurate, but incomplete. Misses deeper significance of aircraft's story. Central Museum of Great Patriotic War in Moscow displays P-39 and Soviet markings. Placard credits Soviet pilots' skill while minimizing aircraft's American origin. Political considerations outweigh historical accuracy, even 80 years later. Most accurate commemoration may be simplest. Small monument at former Soviet air base near Krasnodar honors fighter pilots who operated from field during 1943-1944. Lists names of fallen pilots. Mentions aircraft types flown. P-39 Airacobra appears frequently. No political narrative. Just names, dates, aircraft. Truth needs no embellishment. Production lines in Buffalo finally shut down 8.1944 after producing 9,584 P-39s in various configurations. Workers who built them probably never knew full story of how their aircraft performed in combat. Read negative reports from American pilots. Heard criticisms. Understood fighters they were building considered failures by their own military. Couldn't have known that on Eastern Front, those same fighters were helping turn tide of largest land war in history. Factory workers maintained quality and craftsmanship, even when building aircraft their own pilots called death traps. Kept production lines running when conventional wisdom suggested programs should be canceled. Their dedication ensured that when Soviets needed fighters desperately, aircraft were available to send them. Different kind of courage, measured in rivets and welds rather than bullets and blood. By 1950, P-39 had disappeared almost entirely from military service. Jets had taken over completely, rendering propeller-driven fighters obsolete except in limited roles. Most Airacobras were scrapped. Aluminum melted down for other uses. Few survived in museums, preserved as examples of wartime technology. But aircraft's influence lived on in every American fighter that followed, carrying forward lessons learned from both failures and unexpected successes. Story of P-39 Airacobra challenges comfortable narratives about technological progress and military superiority. Reveals that success and failure are often context-dependent. Same design can be both inadequate and excellent depending on how it's employed. demonstrates that innovation sometimes comes from unexpected sources and that path to progress is rarely straight or predictable. American aviation designers who initially mocked P-39's unconventional layout later adopted many of its features in their jet fighters. Soviet pilots who received aircraft as cast-offs from their American allies transformed it into one of war's most effective weapons. Lessons from this contradiction shaped American aviation for decades, teaching engineers that brilliance and failure often coexist in same design, separated only by how and where that design is used. Engineers at Bell Aircraft, who designed P-39 with such high hopes, never intended creating controversial failure finding redemption in Soviet service. They had envisioned innovative fighter dominating aerial combat with unprecedented firepower and revolutionary layout. When American pilots rejected their creation, calling it flying coffin, must have been devastating. Yet their design choices, even ones that failed, contributed to foundation of American jet aviation. Tricycle landing gear, nose-mounted heavy cannon, emphasis on pilot visibility, car door cockpit entry, all became standard features in subsequent designs. Failure taught lessons success never could. Fighter that nobody wanted ended up teaching American aviation designers everything they needed to know about building world's finest aircraft. Its flaws exposed critical gaps in understanding. Its unexpected success in Soviet hands demonstrated that design requirements must match operational reality. Its innovative features, refined and improved, became standard elements of jet fighter design. Flying coffin became foundation for American air superiority in jet age. Pokryshkin ended war with 59 confirmed victories, making him among highest-scoring Allied aces, 3 times Hero of Soviet Union, highest honor nation could bestow. Post-war memoir described P-39 as finest fighter he ever flew. American machine taught me everything important about air combat, rewarded skill and punished mistakes, gave me tools to survive and weapons to destroy my enemies. More than 4,700 P-39s were delivered to Soviet Union during war, representing nearly half of all Airacobras produced. Soviet pilots flew them from Stalingrad to Berlin, racking up thousands of victories against Luftwaffe. These were same aircraft American and British pilots rejected as unsuitable for combat. Same flying coffins test pilots refused to fly. In Soviet hands, they became instruments of victory. Today, few people remember P-39 Airacobra. Those who do typically recall it as failed American fighter, finding unexpected success in Soviet service. Assessment accurate, but incomplete. Misses fundamental significance of aircraft story. P-39 represents messy, complicated reality of technological development where failures teach lessons just as valuable as successes. Represents truth that context determines success more than absolute capability. Represents idea that rejection and redemption can coexist, separated only by how and where design is employed. Modern fighter pilots flying F-35 Lightning II, most advanced fighter aircraft ever built, operate machines carrying lessons learned from despised P-39, tricycle landing gear enabling precise carrier landings. Emphasis on pilot visibility through advanced helmet-mounted displays, understanding that tactical employment matters more than raw performance. Weapons integration following principles validated by P-39's nose-mounted cannon. Thread connects flying coffin to fifth-generation fighters, connection unbroken, lessons learned in blood over Eastern Front 1943, applied in simulators and classrooms today. History flows through aviation development like groundwater, invisible but essential. Aircraft dismissed as America's worst fighter contributed more to American aviation development than many celebrated designs. Flying coffin that pilots refused to fly enabled Soviet pilots to achieve scores rivaling war's greatest aces. Failure that should have been cancelled taught lessons shaping future of aerial combat. Sometimes machines we reject teach us more than ones we embrace. Sometimes worst becomes foundation for best. P-39 Airacobra proved both, failed in American hands, triumphant in Soviet skies, foundation for jet-age aviation, all simultaneously, all true, all essential to understanding how aviation evolved from propellers to jets, from failure to supremacy. Factory worker in Buffalo who froze his wrench 3.1942, watching test pilot walk away from P-39, couldn't have known. Aircraft he was building would help turn tide of largest land war in history. Would teach lessons shaping American aviation for generations. Would prove that rejection and redemption, failure and triumph, often share same airframe. He just riveted aluminum and went home. War decided rest. History remembers no one. War cares about nothing except mathematics of survival. P-39 Airacobra survived its rejection, proved its worth in unexpected theater, taught lessons shaping future of combat aviation. Flying Coffin became legend. Death Trap became teacher. Failure became foundation. Sometimes, that's how history works.